So there it is, Ned. You got it? Okay. I'm doing that for the recorder. All right. I'm going to throw a little bit of unexpected stuff here initially here, all right? So bear with me. And that is, this is not rocket science, okay? As we get into some of these very interesting situations, lack of tillage, more cover crops, etc., folks, we got to be scouting. So end it right here, but I've been committed to a whole hour, and you got to get your points. All right, so here we go. And I want to really make again this emphasis that as we've got different, again, mostly plant-type materials out there, there are critters. Note I said critters that are going to take advantage of it because that becomes their home and their food. And all living things need that, all right, including slugs. All right, so I want to talk about diversity, all right? And university campuses, you got to be real careful with diversity. You have to be very all-inclusive, et cetera. Not so much there, but we're talking about the diversity of little things that are going bump in the night. And this is one of the ways we collect them. This is, write this down. This is high tech here, all right? This is called a pitfall trap, all right? You can see that it's nothing more than a cup or some type of collector with a funnel that fits sort of close. And then at the bottom, you put some antifreeze. You want to try to make it nice and level with the ground. Oop, that didn't do what I thought it would do. See which one works better here. Yeah, I like that. I like that better. All right. Yeah, I know. Yeah, the lasers don't do so well on that. But anyway, so we want it to be kind of nice and level with the surface. And the idea here is that anything, again, crawling around on the ground is eventually going to fall in here and then be collected. The antifreeze is a way to kill them humanely, all right? We don't want them to be harmed, all right? And the other is that it's a nice preservative, so you can actually keep them in there for several days, if not weeks, and still kind of tell what they are over time. All right, and too, they had a little roof on top to try to keep the rain out. So this is what a fancy dandy trap looks like out at our training center. We put these out in different types of plots with different tillages, etc., cover crops. And here it is with the rain roof, and not too exciting. Note that I have a flag here because I need to be able to find those things, all right? All right, so this is removing the rain shield and, of course, the funnel. And you see down below the collecting vial. And this is looking down into the antifreeze and all the little critters that are collected. So the light ones, or the small ones, typically float, and the big heavy-duty ones, they sink. All right, and so you got to mix the whole thing up, pour it out, and then try to collect or figure out what's in there. Here's a group doing just that. We collect the antifreeze in a different container to be disposed of properly. Did you note that? All right. Anyone listening? And then, of course, what they're doing now is they've got all the little critters out on a breadboard and sorting through it. And it's usually a lot of this, what is that? Okay, it's, ooh, that type of thing. But for the most part, this is what we find. Pest species. Gee, go figure. All right. We kind of knew that they were there. So various cutworm species, as well as armyworm species, and certainly slugs, all right? And then here's the good news. We find a lot of ground beetles, and there's other beetles such as rove beetles, even fireflies that are predators. Find lots of different spiders, big ones, little ones, and then other things as well. So lots of things that are also trying to eat on those pest species we just saw. And then mostly we find this. I'm going to just kind of clump them in the the cleanup crew, all right, the decomposers. So we got earthworms. Anybody know what an earthworm looks like? All right. I did put a picture up there, right? Just for those that didn't know. You know, the pill bugs, the millipedes, and so forth. Here's one of the big groups that we don't pay a whole lot of attention to. Matter of fact, science really doesn't understand these springtails all that much. We're just starting to be a little bit more focused on them, especially as we get into some of these long-term cover crop situations where we've got a whole different zoo out there living that we didn't realize before. And springtails are a big part of it because they help, of course, decompose, but they're also a food source for some of those other critters, such as the spiders and ground beetles, etc., when there aren't any pest species. All right, I'm a longtime IPMer, just like Curtis, and this is my favorite little thing from John Muir from many years ago. He's a famous naturalist, took wonderful pictures, by the way. And so we see this. We saw this decades ago, and we see it today, and that is when we start thinking we got it figured out, we tug, and then we find out, oh, crap, there's other things happening here we did not realize. All right, can anyone formulate a thought in their mind of what maybe one of these are? All right, so I'm an old bug guy. I immediately think of DDT. It was going to save the world, right? And in some cases it did. All right, you think about it. As far as yellow fever and stuff, especially during the war, but the big war, I should say. And then, but what did we find out? Well, there were some environmental negatives to it. All right? Think of Roundup Ready beans when it first came out. Gosh, that was easy to control weeds. Pretty inexpensive, too, compared to what we had been doing. And now we've got a room full of people in a dicamba training because now it ain't working like it used to. All right? So now, who knows with this new systems, who knows what's going to be the consequence that we're going to learn from a few years from down the road. So I think you know where I'm going. There's lots of interesting things that intertwine here. All right? But I think one of the challenges here as we get into more intensive situations is creating, maintaining, and I'm even going to put another slash there, understanding what is a healthy soil. There is no perfect definition, and there is no perfect understanding of what that really is. All right? And, of course, slugs is just one of the many, many things now involved with as we create all these residues. All right, so let's go on. What is not a slug? A snail. All right. Oftentimes, a slug is defined as what? Yeah, excellent. There it is. A snail without a shell. Well, this is a snail. And I don't know whether it really is a pest or not. Now, I did meet with one producer this past winter. He farms some way down in the Ohio River, basically Kentucky, all right? So, and but basically the thing is he told me he had snails to the point where they destroyed his crop. I have no proof of it. I have no pictures or anything, but it's kind of like, so it's the first time I'd heard of it as actually being a pest. In other words, I've seen them before, not that big a deal. You think slugs are hard to control? Lordy, how are we going to kill these things, huh? All right? So, and slugs are not insects. I already gave that away. All right? Even though you can have some insects that are slimy, legless, and can be damaging, but of course, they're different. And the reason I only bring it up is not to insult you, but just to remind you that insecticides do not, I'm going to say it again, do not work on slugs. They're completely different. All right. By the way, if you're wondering, and I'm sure you were, this is courtesy of the forensics folks, and that's a blowfly larva, and of course they feed on flesh. All right. So just in case you were wondering. All right, so here we go into slugs. Are you ready? All right. It starts off as an egg. Now the eggs, for the most part, overwinter. Some laid probably in the spring and probably in the fall. But for the most part, we're talking about eggs that are overwintering. I did go out and look in my wife's flower bed near our hosta, and I had no problem finding slug eggs. So they're doing quite well, at least for Lafayette, Indiana, okay? And then they become juveniles, all right? First, they're really, really tiny. So I hope you can see that that is a penny there, and that is a newly hatched juvenile. And then they get bigger, and this is when they're dangerous to us in our crops, because this is like a teenager. All right, and what do teenagers do? And I'm thinking of more of teenage boys. What do they do with food? Anyone ever raise a teenage boy? Man, it disappears. All right, so the point being is they eat a lot. All right, and then of course they become adults, and then the cycle continues. Now they've got it made because they're actually both male and female. So mating can actually occur with themselves, but typically it will be with another slug, all right, because it's better for the genetic flow of certainly. So anyway, how do you know it's an adult from a juvenile? You ask them, all right. That was a joke, all right. And then how else do you know? Well, if you catch them laying eggs, then you know it's an adult, okay. These juveniles can be pretty darn close and yet not there. Okay, so, okay, don't get scared. All of a sudden it's kind of like, oh my gosh, he's going to talk about the different slug species. I am not an expert in this area. I'm going to give you two species, all right? This is the one you're most likely to encounter. Okay, it's called the gray garden slug. I have no idea why it's called gray, because it's white and it's black and it's, I guess, gray. All right, I guess you mix the colors and you get gray, right? But this is probably the one, again, you're probably likely to come against. As a matter of fact, you go anywhere in the, not only the U.S., but anywhere in the world. Likely if you see a slug, it's going to be one of these, unless you're talking about the big banana slugs or something like that. The juveniles, once again, are the most problematic. And fortunately, it's only one generation per year. All right, so there you go. One more to do. The marsh slug. Now, this one is indigenous. In other words, it's always been here as far as we know. Oh, by the way, I have sought literature and I've asked questions, and I cannot find how a slug originates in a given field. Have you ever wondered that? It's kind of like, I've been farming this, my family's been farming this for 100 whatever years, and all of a sudden it's kind of like they're a problem this year, and it's kind of like, where'd they come from? And simply, there is no answer to that question. It's just they are here, okay? The gray garden slug came in sometime in the 1800s, likely, of course, from Europe. But as far as this dude, it's probably always been there in fields, taking advantage of it. Of course, with the marsh especially, it's generally in a very, very wet environment, kind of as its name implies. All right, so
I can. So that timer, is that going to start? Yeah, this should be good. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Testing, testing.
We are so excited to welcome you here to our 2018 Stakeholders Summit. I enjoyed seeing many of you last night at our welcome reception, and so glad that you all are continuing great conversations here. We have an exciting program for you today, so we're going to go ahead and get started to keep us on time. We hope you enjoyed last night's welcome reception. It is kind of a new part of our program, and we appreciate Elanco Animal Health sponsorship for that. We do have an exciting day today full of great speakers, so I hope you enjoyed breakfast this morning, sponsored by United Egg Producers. Should give you lots of great protein and lots of energy for a long day. So our summit's theme this year is Protect Your Roots. Which is all about how we can be proud of our past, be proud of our current roles within the industry, but also look forward to how we can grow and continue to succeed and make animal agriculture successful. We have some things that you can do when you leave here that will help all of us continue to grow animal agriculture. Everyone who's a part of our industry, from farmers and ranchers, veterinarians, animal scientists, government officials, representatives, and leaders in the food industry, we all bring a unique sense of pride in our industry. Whether your roots run generations deep or they're newly planted, we all have a role to play in ensuring animal agriculture's future. So our 2018 summit is going to help you build on your roots to secure the future of animal agriculture. If you're an Alliance member, we sincerely thank you for your support and your role as a member of the Alliance to help us help the industry. We are glad to have you here, and for those of you who are not members, we're excited to have you here to learn more about the Alliance and welcome your questions and involvement, and hope that you will consider joining us in the future. We have an amazing staff. We call our staff small but mighty. So I'd like to ask our staff members to all stand so that you can recognize who they are. You can ask any one of us questions about the organization, about the conference itself. But as you see, there's Hannah in the back, Alison here, and Casey in the back. And then we have two other team members out front at registration, Morgan and Najia. So. I'd like to also take a second to recognize our board of directors. We have a 33-member board of directors. For those of you in associations, you know that's a big board of directors, but they are amazing as well. And so if you are a member of our board, could you please stand also? You'll also note they have ribbons that say board members. So if you have questions about the Alliance or want to know more about what value they find in being a part of our organization, please have conversations with them throughout the next couple of days or at the reception this evening. You'll also note that our program is divided into 3 sessions that match our mission statement: connect, engage, and protect. So to learn more about what we do and our accomplishments and activities in each of these areas, we do have a monitor out by the registration area, so I encourage you to stop and take a look at that, learn a little bit more about what we do. We don't want to take up our valuable speaker time sharing all that information, but we do a lot with our small but mighty team, and so I encourage you to stop by the registration monitor to take a look at that. Each one of our team members is going to share just a little bit about what those words mean to us as the Alliance staff. And so with that, I'd like to invite Alison Jones-Brimmer as our first team member to come up and share with you a little bit more about what our connect words mean to the Animal Ag Alliance. Thank you all again for being here, being part of our 17th annual summit, and we hope you enjoy the day. So look forward to talking to many of you later today.
Thank you, Kay, and good morning, everyone. From stakeholders to consumer influencers, we bring people together. The Alliance is a united team of hundreds of enthusiastic members, individuals, companies, and associations all across the food chain committed to protecting animal agriculture and preserving consumer choice. No matter the issue, we bring people together for good. We connect our members and the entire animal agriculture industry by providing timely, relevant information on emerging issues via our steering committee, issues management committee, supply channel subcommittee, monthly member email updates, and our online resource library, which is updated continuously. We help connect college students with an interest in agriculture to resources that helps them be effective advocates on their campus through our College Aggies online program. You'll hear more about that program later today, but we do have several of the top placing students from that program here with us at the Stakeholders Summit. So I'd like to ask them to please stand, and I'd encourage everyone at the summit to take a few moments to talk with these students about the program, about their career path in agriculture, because these are the future leaders of our industry. If you'd like to connect with fellow Summit attendees, please download our Summit mobile app. It is sponsored by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. In addition to facilitating networking opportunities, the app contains our program, speaker bios, sponsor information, and more. To access the app, you'll need to search for and download Attendify from the App Store. Once you have Attendify downloaded and open, you need to search for our event, and there is a search bar that will pop up. When you click into that search bar, another piece of information will pop up right below the search bar that says enter a code. That's the easiest way to find us. Click on enter the code and enter AAA18. So it's all lowercase, AAA18. You'll hit submit, and the Stakeholder Summit should pop up, and you can join that listing and create your profile. If you have any questions or any trouble downloading the mobile app, feel free to check in with anyone who's at the registration desk, and they'll be able to help you. Before we jump into the Summit program, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our Summit sponsors and Alliance members. If your organization or company is a member or sponsor of the Alliance, could you please stand to be recognized? Thank you all so much for your contribution to the Animal Agriculture Alliance. We sincerely could not do our work of bridging the communication gap between farm and fork without the support of our members, sponsors, and donors. If you were not one of those who are standing and you have questions about how to join the Alliance, please come find me. I'd love to talk to you during a meal, a break, or reception. You can send me a message in the Summit mobile app or find me at any of those times. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Tyne Morgan, who is back to host the Summit for the second time. Tyne is the host of the U.S. Farm Report, the longest-running syndicated program focused on agriculture and rural life. Tyne is a Missouri girl who has generations of agriculture rooted in her blood. She got her start in public speaking through her involvement in the National FFA organization. After getting her first agricultural broadcasting job in high school, she went on to study agricultural journalism at the University of Missouri-Columbia. After spending countless hours on the road as the Ag Day and U.S. Farm Report national reporter, Tyne was named as the first female host of the U.S. Farm Report in 2014. Please help me give Tyne a warm welcome.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. Well, a few months ago, when I received a note from Hannah asking me if I wanted to come back and MC the event for a second time, I had so much fun last year that it took no time for me to immediately respond back and say yes. And part of the reason, I had someone ask me yesterday, they said, do you get nervous? Is it hard emceeing this event? And I want to say, without a doubt, it is so fun and it is not difficult thanks to Hannah. Hannah makes this so easy. In my notes, you should see these notes in this book that she left for me at the front desk at the hotel. I mean, if I have any questions and I think I'm going to have a question, just turn a page because the answer's there. She's one step ahead of everyone. So Hannah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Partly, I love this event each year because you look across the crowd and it is a very diverse audience. But the nice part is we all have the common ground of animal agriculture. And so this has been an extremely fun event last year. And I'm excited to cover it again this year. So this is my family. Even though I'm a host of U.S. Farm Report, and I tell everyone I have my dream job. This is what I went to school to do, broadcast journalism, or agricultural journalism with an emphasis in broadcast. You don't get much more niche than that. And there's not a lot of jobs out there. And so this is what I wanted to do. But a few years ago when I had my first child, Kinsler, that's when everything changed. My role of mom is my most prized role, and I miss them when I'm gone. But they keep me on my toes. So this is my husband, James. He is a Texan through and through. So I thought Texans were proud, but apparently he thinks Missourians are more proud. And maybe we go head-to-head sometimes, and I prove him that Missourians are a little bit more proud than that Texan. But he does a lot. I'm on the road almost every week, and he does a lot at home. But this week, it's warm. It's been warm in northern Indiana for the first time. The girls were so excited to get outside. So I texted him, and I said, hey, how are things going? Do you mind sending me a picture of the girls? I really miss them. And he goes, yeah, I'll send you a picture, but you're not going to like it. I'm like, oh, my gosh. So he sends me a picture, and mind you, we live in a neighborhood. Okay, we're not out, we're kind of out in the country, but we have neighbors. And he sends me a picture, and there's my 2- and my 3-year-old in the backyard naked. Naked. Now, mind you, the 2-year-old just got potty trained 2 weeks ago. It's going well so far. But, her pants are to her ankles. And I'm like, what's going on? And he goes, well, I was changing the blade on my mower. Really? I was changing the blade on my mower, and I walked around, and this is how I found your daughters. They're definitely your daughters. Really? So I've learned I can't FaceTime the girls because at 2 and 3 years old, they just don't quite understand why mom's on the phone and not in front of them. We have the talk before I leave. I tell them I'll be home pretty soon, but they just don't quite understand it. So the other day, or a couple weeks ago, I called him. And I said, well, how are things going? And he said, well, they're going okay, but I have a little story to share. I said, okay, what happened? And he goes, that Doc McStuffin set you got Kimbrel, the youngest, for her birthday? I said, well, yeah, I bought it. I remember it. He goes, well, instead of giving me a checkup, she decided it was time for me to give her a checkup. So she walks up to me, and I act like I'm the doctor, and I say, well, Kinsler, what ails you? And without a beat, she says, I have kids. I can tell you one thing. I've received 50-plus checkups now in my lifetime from Kinsler, and not once when she asks me why I'm sick have I said it's because I have children. So I've quickly learned that maybe I'm traveling too much, and they are turning out to be their father. So we're going to have a talk. But the conversation about food, at my house, I'm the one that's in charge of the grocery store trip every week, and I prefer it that way. So a couple weeks ago, James goes, I know you've been traveling. Why don't you make a list of what you want at the grocery store, and I'll go for you. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. Because I'm used to going every week. It's like my Saturday or Sunday after church ritual, I just go to the grocery store. Well, I quickly learned that there's no leeway with that list. Like, he buys only what's on the list. So he comes back and he goes, I don't understand why you spend $100 at the grocery store every week. My trip only cost me $40. And I look in the bag, and I'm like, how are we going to eat on this week? Because you find stuff, oh, we're missing this. But when I go to the grocery store, it's like my trip's becoming even more confusing. I consider myself an educated shopper, right? I've been in agriculture. I cover these topics in agriculture. I can consider myself educated. But these are the labels that I see at the grocery store today. Raised without antibiotics, antibiotic-free. Are those different? Are they the same label? Cage-free eggs, non-GMO, GMO verified. There's all these different labels today. And if I'm confused, I can only imagine how confused the average consumer is. Last year, I was invited to speak at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. Definitely a trip that I will never forget. an eye-opening trip, to say the least. Unfortunately, we were speaking at the same time former Vice President Joe Biden was, so our crowd was a little light. I'm not sure why. But anyway, I guess you'll have that. And the head of the MIT Ag Lab, who knew that MIT had an Ag Lab, he was there speaking on the panel with me. And he said, recently we made a trip to USDA, and they were talking about some of the surveys that they're doing with consumers, asking how many of you want your food labeled if it contains antibiotics? How many of you want your food labeled if it contains GMOs? So the same questions that we often that often get asked. And he goes, and then they asked, how many of you want your food labeled if it contains DNA? You laugh. 80% said yes. 80% of the people surveyed said they want their food labeled if it contains DNA. And his point was, when you look at all these confusing labels, you have to remember that the average consumer doesn't even understand the basics of food today, let alone a complex topic of genetically modified organisms or why producers would use antibiotics. I mean, they just don't even understand the basics of food. And so his point was, you have to always go under the impression that that individual is that they don't even realize that DNA is in their food, let alone some of these more complex topics. And we really have to break down these topics for individuals to get them to really realize and know in animal agriculture, in all of agriculture, the practices that we use and why we do what we do. You look at misleading marketing. I saw a recent article in Missouri about a feedlot expansion that's really created a lot of controversy in western Missouri. And so PETA came out, and this Meat Stinks Go Vegan, they put this billboard right on the highway, kind of near where all of this controversy is going on. And Missouri Cattlemen's Association, their head guy, it was so funny, I saw him post something on Facebook, and he says, if we get the attention of PETA, then we're doing something right. But then I Googled, and I was like, you know what? I wonder how many billboards are out there from PETA. So I did a simple Google search. And the first thing that popped up was this article about 3 simple steps for placing an animal rights billboard. You have no idea how easy it is to get a billboard. I mean, they have it right there. 3 simple steps. First, you have to find maybe a billboard that has some open space and call them, and then you need to contact PETA, and they'll find the funding to put this up. But it is so simple to put up a PETA billboard, and I didn't even realize it, and they had it right there, these 3 easy steps. But this is on the interstate when people are driving. These are some of the things that you see. In the news, there's tons of different negative news articles about animal agriculture, but these were a couple letters to the editor of the simple Google search that came up. One of them was, a better way to reserve climate change is to end animal agriculture. And I know we've seen some of these stories out there. There was another one, the problem with animal agriculture and why you should eat less meat. This individual did a couple different, and it was extensive, these articles that they produced. But this is also what's in the news. But I do think some of the conversations are changing. When I was here last year and you hear some of the proactive approaches that are taking place, for so long, agriculture kind of, it feels like we're getting beaten up when it comes to animal agriculture, and you see some of these groups that are very vocal against animal agriculture. But the conversation's starting to change. Last year, I had the chance to sit down with Kellogg Company, and they have a new initiative called Open for Breakfast. And so on the back of every box of cereal, they want to create a conversation. So, when you sit down for cereal, how many of you eat cereal? Our house is a huge cereal fan. How many of you ever look at the back of the box? It turns out a ton of people, actually, while they're sitting there, turn the box around and kind of look at the box of cereal. And so their whole point is they want to use this as an avenue to create this conversation. So if you have a question, you can call a number and talk to someone immediately who will answer some of your questions or your concerns about agriculture. When I talked to them, my point was, I wonder what message are they conveying? Where are they getting their messaging from? And it turns out that even though they don't buy directly from farmers, they're reaching out to some of the processors that they work with, or the mills, the wheat mills in Michigan that they work with, to come up with some of these answers. So they are giving well thought out answers that actually truly represents agriculture today, instead of a simple Google search that may give you some misinformation. And Diane Holdorf, she's the Chief Sustainability Officer. I asked her, I said, why are you doing this? For so long, a lot of major companies haven't been trying to tell the message of farmers, companies that are directly touching consumers like Kellogg's. And she said, well, Tyne, that's simple. Without robust food systems and strong, healthy farms and farmers who can make a good livelihood, the Kellogg Company cannot exist. And I feel like that sentiment is really being conveyed by other major companies, too, that are directly talking to consumers. They know there's a certain type of consumer that will only want organic or will only want a certain niche market, but they also understand that a lot of consumers out there today just want an affordable, safe product, and they want to be the ones to help convey that message. So I know sometimes it feels like the industry is, getting hit from every which side, and that's kind of all we see, because sometimes those voices are very loud. But just know there are a lot of companies now taking notice and realizing that the positive side of agriculture and the good things that farmers and ranchers are doing, it's time to tell that story too. So over the next couple days, I'm excited to hear some of the stories that we can be telling, we should be telling, and really get into some of these conversations really deeply that we can take back and use to continue to communicate about agriculture in a positive way. So with that, let's kick things off. Our first topic, really, I teed it up looking at the labels. But before we get started with that, just remember on Twitter, any of you on Twitter? Some of you? The hashtag is AAA18. So AAA18, that is the hashtag. So be sure to whenever you tweet and share that, use that hashtag. Well, this next the speaker, our first speaker, really wants this to be a conversation. So if you've only had one cup of coffee, you may want to go ahead and get coffee number 2, because he is going to be looking for some interaction from the audience. Fair warning, you had fair warning to get prepared. Even though it's early in the morning, another cup of coffee will help. Well, Mark Gale, over the past 30 years, has made the journey from police beat reporter at the Daily Tampa Times to creative director to partner and CEO at Charleston Orwig. He has kept a keen eye on digital communications from the very beginning. And while he prefers to spend time helping clients and really developing proactive CSR and sustainability practices, he also gets in the trenches to work on crisis communications. Now, the geek in Mark really loves research, like the label study he is about to share with us this morning. So we're all going to geek out with him. With that, welcome Mark to the stage.
Thank you, Tyne.
Thank you, Mark. Here's this.
Okay.
Remember to click down.
Okay. Well, I thought I knew how I was going to start this morning, but kind of shifted it because I thought I should say there's nobody naked in my backyard that I know of. And we are going to talk about food labels, but that point you made about the cereal box is really important, because I've often thought about the reason I ended up being a reporter is because I was the kid who read the cereal box. I mean, I read the ingredients, I read the trademark, I read everything on there. But food labels, we're going to talk about them today in terms of the little rectangle that we all know, and that's so much controversy about that, and that's subject of legislation and such, and then other parts of the label as well, holistically. And so that'll be part of what we get into. And I'm going to share some research with you, but I thought, a really good way to start this would be, as I started to think about these topics, and probably all of you, when you make a presentation, you start to think about, how did we get there? What's the context for this? And as Tyne said, I've been working in agriculture and food for some 30 years, newspaper reporter before that. We work with a lot of clients, from Texas Roadhouse restaurants on sustainability to diesel turkeys. You can go to the grocery store and see their product there, to microbiome for Arm & Hammer. So we're deep in this space, but I thought, I don't know that much about food labels and where they came from and how they got. So I decided to take a little bit of a dive into there to get some context before we started to look at then some research. And so with that in mind, I went and I thought, well, what's the oldest food label I could find for animal agriculture? Does anybody want to guess what and you can just shout it out. Does anybody want to guess what the product was? Pardon me? Honey? No, close. But it could be. And this was not an exhaustive search. This is me looking around. Actually, this is me saying to Michaela, find the oldest food label you can get your hands on. Red Jacket brand lobsters. I thought, well, this is a good one because it's animal agriculture. I don't know if there are any lobster farmers. I kind of doubt that there are any lobster farmers here, but you could be. So this food label is from the Maine archives, and it's from the 1880s. What's really interesting about this to me is if you look at the lower left-hand corner there, it says gold medal, Paris, 1878. So back to the 1880s, food labels for these 4-ounce, and this must have been on the package of a box of 4-ounce tins of canned lobster, were already starting to make claims on the label. So this has been with us from the beginning. And then in that search, I found some other interesting ones I just thought I would share. Liver soup. Now, you have to be careful of the internet because I also found a lot of products that don't exist, including a bunch of them that had names that I wouldn't show or wouldn't mention here. But I think the liver soup is pretty accurate because I saw that in many places. And then I met John here from the UK early. And I don't know, John, if you can verify this from a time in the past, but if you happen to live in the UK about 100 years ago and you didn't have any teeth, there was always Senior's Fish and Meat Paste. So what is named on the label is found in the jar. And if you can see a little caricature, apparently an entire piglet is in that jar. So, but it's soft, so you'll be able to eat it, no bones. Of course, food now labels, when we think about this evolving. And again, I don't know if there are any cricket farmers here, another kind of animal agriculture. I'm going to Austin, Texas, by the way, tomorrow after this. So there is a big cricket farm in Austin, of course, in addition to my grandson, which is why I'm going down there. But these labels say the future of food on them. Crickets and roasted mealworms, the future of food. I don't quite know what to make of that, but that's kind of interesting. And it's the sustainability of food as well. And then, it's sometimes the internet gives you a gift. So I'm just at my desk, and one of the many newsletters that I've subscribed to served this up to me about a day ago. These are all food, quote-unquote, meat products, except none of them have anything to do with animals. And so I'm not making any kind of judgment on that, but when you talk about confusion with the consumer and what they should think about or knowing what to think about, this is all out there working on consumers and confusing them. Anybody here get a Food Navigator? Okay, did you see what was in it yesterday? Did you happen to notice? Well, I happened to, just digress, I put it on my iPad here so I could see it easier than my phone. But so I get this issue of Food Navigator, which is this really, it's an interesting aggregator of all kinds of stories on food companies and agriculture. And you might want to get that if you don't already. And if you want to know where, I can tell you after. But there's an entire list, and some of these, I don't want to read the headlines because I know people in this audience are involved. But what's common in Silicon Valley is that you move fast and break things, talking about a cultured meat company. But that's an awful way to approach making food, an editorial. They had a whole issue. An association, chilling effect of cultured meat. A company represented here, Israeli clean meat startup, clean meat. It's clean ideas becoming bigger and bigger. Another clean meat startup yesterday, $4 million investment. Somebody 3D cultured beef. So it's not clean meat, it's not lab grown. 3D cultured meat is this company. Unlike all the others, the 3D cultured meat company is real meat. I'm sure you'll be happy to know that. And then the very last article here is addressing consumer confusion about healthy eating. And it's like, wow, yeah, no wonder it's confusing. It's confusing to me, and I work in this space. So how did we get here? How do we get to the idea of labels? And I thought, oh, wow, you could argue that it sort of started with Honest Abe, 1862. Launches the Department of Agriculture, leads to the FDA. And then Teddy Roosevelt, Food and Drug Act, I think nobody could argue with this one, 1906, prohibits interstate commerce in misbranded, adulterated food, drinks, and drugs. I mean, I don't know about you, I can kind of agree with that. I don't want adulterated drugs, food, or drinks. Jump ahead all the way to, anybody know when this was? Yeah, 72, somebody said. 1970, Elvis visits the White House, and the government says every manufacturer should encourage to provide truthful information. So I don't know what Elvis has anything to do with this, but I came across that photo, and I thought, that's just too good. I got to use that somehow. Especially if you look into history a little bit, probably what was happening right now was Nixon. I'd love to have the tapes of that. Nixon was having Elvis investigated for un-American acts and all kinds of crazy stuff. So that was 1970. But then by 1980, which maybe for guys like me, for some of you, for those students back there, 1980 is probably like, what is that, sort of the Stone Age or something for you guys? I don't know. But it's not that long ago that the USDA and HHS, 7 simple dietary guidelines. If you think about it in the context of America or Europe or other places, 1980 it's a long time ago, but it's not that long ago. And you can read those. Eat a variety of foods. That's a good idea. If you drink alcohol, do so in moderation. That's a good idea. So, avoid too much sugar. That's something that's in the news right now, curious enough. So not bad for 1980. That's pretty good. But jump ahead another big milestone. We're going to go forward, and then we're going to come back again. 2015, those 7 simple have gone to 41 recommendations. 72-page booklet, but summarized in Choose My Plate. So it's gotten a lot more complicated. When did this happen? Anybody know when the rectangle came to be? Gosh, I'm glad I did this research because I didn't know either. So I had to look it up. Well, I'll tell you, in 1990, Nutrition Labeling and Education Act passes. And that's when we started to get this effort to tell us how many calories were in food and all these other things that I talk about it. I live in a neighborhood too, like Tyne, and I say the neighborhood test. We're at this table back here. We're just talking about the neighborhood test at breakfast. So I have Matt and Kathy on one side, Wes and Kathy on the other side, and all these things that we know so much about. Do they get it? Is it on their radar? And they're smart people, professional people, but a lot of this is not on their radar. They don't know what we're talking about. Well, this maybe is, it's a good idea. I try to read those. I don't always know, the fat, saturated fat. Should I be eating it? Should I not? I'm kind of confused about that. I'm probably not that much different than you guys are on that. And other consumers are like that as well. So this clip kind of sums up, some of this consumer confusion about food labeling. And Greg back there, I think, is going to click it for me.
Two cookies. I ate Fig Newtons by the sleeve. 2 sleeves is a serving size. I open them both and eat them like a tree chipper. Fig Newton shavings coming off the side. And I put a Newton catcher and empty that bag out as a snack. What the hell are they talking about? 2 fig Newtons. They're the size of a postage stamp. You want another one? Well, I don't know. I've already had 2 whole entire fig Newtons. Maybe I could try to muscle one more down, but I don't think I'm gonna. I am stuffed to the rafters.
So, kind of funny, but true, because, those labels, at least that serving size, I started to think about that. Maybe in terms of calories it fits, but nobody really eats what's on that serving size, right? It doesn't matter if you're big or small, or you like fig Newtons or you don't. So I don't know what to make of that, but I think it's kind of troubling that it doesn't reflect what people really. It's the truth. Who eats 2 fig Newtons? I don't eat 2 fig Newtons. So what's the role of food labels? Does anybody want to say what they think food labels should do? Advertise the product? Inform? Choices? Well, over time, arguably this is kind of, keep out harmful ingredients. Think back to Teddy Roosevelt. We want an accurate list of contents. That seems like a fair ask. And then we started to move into the modern era. Keep America healthy. Think about that in 1970. Then we moved into keep America from getting fat. It's the truth of it. Come on, we all know the truth. And then now we're going to move into this era of enhance lives and lifestyles. That's where food is going to, if you think about it. So our relationship with food has evolved over time. Now we're going to take a little bit of a look at some research from, first of all, Tyne showed some of these, and then, so there are all these claims that are out there on food, and that, in addition to the rectangle, is part of what's happening and part of what's working on consumers. And it gets back to this idea of let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So 400 BC, this idea has been with us. Hippocrates, and unfortunately nobody knows that Hippocrates really, sorry to pop the bubble, but if you dig into this, nobody knows whether he really said that or not, but it sounds really good, doesn't it? And that statue looks pretty smart, and 400 BC is a long time ago, so it must be true. I want it to be true. Whether it's not or not, I'm not sure. But that idea is out there and probably stronger in society, in America at least, than it's ever been before. Now, here's some recent information from our friends in the government to help us make sense of that so we can be healthy. I don't think this one's going to pass the neighbor test. I don't think Matt and Kathy are going to be reading that. That's probably great information. And as I'm talking to you, I believe because I'm standing up here and what I do for a living, I should have every reason to have read every bit of that because I'm showing it to you on a slide. But I'm just realizing, almost embarrassing, you know what? I didn't read it either. And, and I have vested interest. I mean, I scanned it. That's probably what everybody's doing. So that's not the solution of what to do either. So where is this all going to take us? And now we'll delve into a few things. And this first part is with the help of my friends at Data Essentials. Do you guys know Data Essentials at all? Their research, Laura, I see you raise your hand. They're a research firm that does a lot of work in food and agriculture on trends and such. They also have a newsletter that you might want to subscribe to, and if you want, you can grab me later and I can put you onto that. And then there's a researcher that we've collaborated with there, Maeve Webster. Maeve has since spun off and has her own firm, Menu Matters, but she still works with Data Essentials. So this is some Data Essentials research. So they looked at consumers, healthy weight management, healthy 2.0 is feel good, healthy 3.0 is going to take us to these benefits of functional nutrition. So if you look at it over time, they've charted consumers, and consumers are moving more toward, and consumers are saying, I want food that not just sustains me, but food that can enhance my lifestyle. And, despite all the difficulties or strife we might have in America, and there is a lot of poverty and homeless and all those things, but we live in a wealthy country. We have the luxury here, the true luxury of our problem with food today collectively, this group, everybody here, everybody in this room. You know what your problem with food is today? Mine too. There's too much of it to eat. Digress for a moment. God bless America. What a wonderful place to live where our problem is we have too much food to eat. So that has nothing to do with my presentation, but it's just an observation. So now we have the luxury of worrying about food that has other attributes that we care about. Is it going to help me sleep? Will it make my memory better? Am I going to, that last one on the lower right, beauty and appearance, apparently I'm not eating enough of those. Energy and performance. So that's where Data Essentials research says people are wanting to go. But now let's get back a little bit more to where we are. Consumers say, 75%, they don't trust the accuracy of food labels. And this is going to vary. You can look, this is from a group called Label Insights a year or so ago. This will vary, but no matter how you look at it from secondary research, people don't trust the accuracy or they don't understand, or however you want to look at it, consumers are not satisfied with it. 35% admit they sometimes confused by what labels are saying. And then I have some more current research that's going to back that up. So apparently we're not doing a very good job. Also, if you think about it, though, food is a relatively complicated thing. 75% of younger consumers want manufacturers to share information on how food is made. They'd like that shared on the label. This one from Chicago Tribune. So those are just some backdrops. Now we'll get into a little bit of research that we recently did at Charleston, Orwig. 2 surveys, one just on general use of food labels, and then one, some new information we're sharing here, collaborated with Hannah and Kay and the Animal Ag Alliance to delve into 500 consumers to ask some questions that particularly relevant to this group. "500 respondents each. There's a slight skew to female. Ages 18 to 65 across America. So we have representatives from all parts of the country. The reason that we went to 500 here is we use these surveys to have a large enough sample size to be able to get us to some statistical accuracy. And then typically for our clients and for ourselves, then we'll take what we learned from one of these and do a deeper dive and find what we think is interesting and then go after that a little bit more aggressively. The reason it skews female is because it's not sexist, it's just a fact that women are more interested in the food and probably traditionally in America are still shopping for more food or are the shoppers. That's just what happens at the grocery store, whether it's here in Milwaukee or anyplace else. And so there's more interest there. It's not a radical skew, but it is a little bit more skew female and from across America. So then what we might do is break this down and look at a specific, we do call out a little bit male, female, a little bit of geographic regions around the country, but then we would look deeper into that. Well, the good news is 63% of those surveyed believe that the information on the labels of food, and we're not isolating this to the rectangle or the front or the back of the cereal box, Tyne. we're saying, do you think the labels on food, is it important? They say, yeah, it's very or extremely important. So in agriculture and food, as a manufacturer, here's some really great news. Most people looking at your package, a captive audience, they want you to give them valuable information. That's a great position to be in. A lot of advertising we do, people don't want to see it. Here we have a realm where the majority are saying, I want to see it. I want to partake of the information. What do you think is the first thing, what do they want on the food label? What are they looking for? Somebody want to guess? Calories would be part of it. Anybody else want to venture in, like a general categories? Pardon me? Serving size. Yep. Others over there? This room? Carbohydrates. You guys you're in the ballpark. You're very warm. Over here? Nutrition is the most important. So they want nutritional information on the label, which is great. Trouble is, people don't understand it, but here's how that breaks down specifically. 71%. So majority of people are saying the label is important. I'm going to look at it. And then they're saying, I want nutritional information. So if you have a product that delivers that, I would take that as really good news. And then it breaks down to where the product is made, ingredient sourcing. Here's one when we did this survey that really surprised me. Allergen information. That's 40%. Allergies. Just last week, you probably saw this study about the slight raise, small but continual increase in autism rates in America and around the world, and scientists don't know what's causing that. And so if you think about some of those things, and I don't know about you, when I was a kid, you didn't hear much about people being allergic to peanuts or whatever, but now there's anecdotally, on my street, I live on a street with a lot of kids. There are kids across the street allergic to peanuts. You can't give them cookies, that sort of thing. So people are very interested in that. And then some of the other things, they're interested, but it's not as primary. This slide is a little complicated. It looks a little complicated, but it breaks down, really. And it says, compared to the last 2 years, and you can think about this for yourselves, are you more or less interested in this? So not only do people think labels are important, nutrition information is important, 41% are more interested in that information than they were 2 years ago. That's pretty compelling. That's compelling to me. And if you think about all those claims that are out there now in terms of what food can do, and this is healthier for you, that's healthier for that, the other thing will help you sleep more, that doesn't, surprise you. And then some of that other ingredient information, 17% are more interested in that than they were 2 years ago. It's not as big as 41%, but people are taking a deeper interest in this. Where the product is made, ingredient sourcing, allergen information, people are more interested. And then I would just caution that some of those on the left, company practices minus 3%, information on growers, employees behind products, that doesn't mean that people aren't interested. What it means is that they're not more interested in, they're basically statistically about as interested in that now as they were 2 years ago. So that red doesn't mean that they're not interested. It just means that interest in these other things has gone up faster. So I guess this is the old and new, and maybe for somebody over here said calorie information is most important. So maybe that helps, and some of these things, those percentages out front, maybe that helps. So 71% want nutrition information on labels. How many people say food companies are doing a great job of that? Want to take a guess? %29% believe manufacturers are doing a really good job of putting the desired information on there. So that's not terrible. Some people think it's good, almost a third. 11% think manufacturers are doing a bad job of food labels. And then there are a lot of people, most people, kind of just, sort of. It's okay. It's not great. So we could take this not so much as companies are doing a bad job, maybe as there's a lot of room because we have an audience with a high interest. It's difficult, though, to isolate, and that's why I believe you would have to dive deeper into some of these issues to find out what's really going to be compelling for people. Let's move into another realm here, meat and protein. So this is the other survey, 500 across America, and we haven't shared this with anybody so far. We did this just a few weeks ago. Finished it. We're trying to wait as long as possible. Hannah, who, yes, Tyne, is wonderful at communicating, because I had some questions about things, and I'd ping her, and then I get this thing, oh, she's on vacation for 3 days. I'm like, oh! And then I would get an email from her at like 7 o'clock that night. So pretty impressive. She was like, oh, so you're starting the survey? It's like, not yet. Oh, is that survey going? Yeah, we're working on it. So we wanted to wait as long as we could because we wanted to be current. And all those headlines in Food Navigator, for example, which reach out to consumers, are causing this to shift. So this is just about a month old, which is as long as we could wait to get into that survey. But again, doing some research for this one, I just came across, I thought, this really cool ad from the American Meat Institute for protein, for meat. And the answer to the question on the lower right there, who needs protein? They both do. So the young football player and, the dad, I presume, sitting in the chair, they both need protein. Well, I'm in the grocery store, and I'm, kind of being the creepy guy. I'm taking products out of the cooler, and I'm putting them back in, and then I'm going over to the meat thing, and I'm going back over to the freezer thing, and then I'm, it's like the surveillance camera of me wouldn't be that good. They're looking for me to put something in my pocket, I think. But I came across this. I had seen this, so I'm at work. I'm seeing this ad, and I thought, that's a cool ad. I'm going to use it. It's perfect for the group. And then I go to the freezer section, and I come across this product. And I thought, wow, I don't know if that strikes you, but to me it's like, oh my gosh, look at that. Italicized word, red background, white out of blue, but this time it's for the Boca burger instead of a steak. And so, one is like 1960 or so, and one is 2018 in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. And this has nothing to do with the research, but I thought it was really interesting in terms of reaching out to consumers. And I had to wonder to myself, it's like, wow, was the package designer for Boca Burgers researching the meat industry? I don't know. But it's a good question, and it was just struck by the similarity of it. So Hannah and Kay and I were talking about, what about, they said, could you, in your survey, ask some things about labels that might increase purchase intent? And so we said, yeah, we could do that across America. And so we asked about all these things. And that's kind of a big list, and you could probably come up with other parts of that. I would caution you not to look too much on the 46.5 at the bottom, because that says none of the above. That's less than half of the population saying these things have no impact on my purchase intent. And, whether or not that's true, I don't know, but let's break this down just a little bit. So more than half are saying, as a matter of fact, those claims do have an impact on purchase intent. The neighbor test is hard on these. So Maeve Webster, my friend, colleague, research partner there, she and I were talking about this slide. Natural and locally raised, those are pretty vague and intuitive things. So if I think about Wes and Kathy, my neighbors, it's like, yeah, they kind of know what that means. Pretty easy, so that would make sense that they would say that those things. And, we all know the debate on natural and what it's been like. Some of those others are a little bit harder, but here's another reason why this slide is important. Because people who are interested in what's on the label are not one-dimensional. Or a lot of them are not one-dimensional. In fact, people who checked more than one checked 3 or more of these as being important to them. And we'll see that come up again in just a moment. So if you're of a mind, to just pick the top one, if you're of a mind to care about free range, you're probably of a mind to care about, maybe antibiotic-free or non-GMO or grass-fed or whatever. So consumers who are like that, they're interested consumers. They're not one-dimensional consumers. So another question we talked with Hannah and Kay about was no antibiotics ever, antibiotic-free. And 23% some impact, 29% strong or high impact on purchase intent. 24% in the Northeast. The Northeast skewed highest on this. Taken together, 52% indicate moderate or high impact. So those labels out there, people are interested in that. Whether or not they know exactly what that means, I don't know. We'd have to probe consumers to know about that. But they're interested in these label claims, and a good number of them, now that leaves a lot of people who aren't, but a good number of them are saying this has an impact on the product that I might buy. Let's move to a different part of that category. Humanely raised, animal welfare certified, those types of things that speak to how I'm treating the animal. Pretty similar to the previous slide. 21% some impact on intent. And then you can see the 13 and the 12, pretty similar to this on the previous. But it turns out, and I have to credit Maeve with thinking to dig into the spreadsheet on this one, there's a really high correlation between the high impact people who say antibiotic-free are also the high impact on humanely raised, which maybe shouldn't be surprising. But what it tells you is that, so if we think about the fact that people who choose one of these aspects, a lot of them are choosing multiple. And then if we isolate high impact, it's the same people. So it's not random. These people are committed. They're more committed to these ideas. So it's verification. A lot of this we think is anecdotal. We read it in the New York Times or somewhere. This is what people are wanting. But when we ask the people, what do you think? This is what they're thinking. This isn't just some, opinion. So those are a lot of the same people. That 17.2 is from the previous slide. Lab-grown meats. We wanted to ask a couple things about lab-grown meats. This is such an evolving... I hate to stand here and say to you, I'm going to show you some research. It's only a few weeks old and it's probably outdated. But I'm going to show you some research. It's only a few weeks old and it's probably outdated. I mean, this is happening so fast, so radically fast. It's curious. But as of a few weeks ago, a lot of people hadn't heard about it. That number is probably lower now. No reservations about eating, maybe. You might say that on that upper right, that's not much. I don't know, that's 19% of people saying maybe. That's not bad. And then the 57%, saying no. Well, that could be various reasons for a new category. 6%, shout out to the Midwest, 6% of the Midwest. Yeah, we'll try it. All right. We're hardy people, Casey. Although you're from Maine, so you're kind of the Northeast on that other one, yeah. Casey's my colleague. And on the board, Casey Hushin. Shout out. Raises cows in her backyard. True. We looked a little bit more into this, and if you think about it, that, I wouldn't eat it. You delve into it, could be because they don't understand it, because look at these. I don't trust it. It's not natural. It doesn't seem healthy. You could argue those are kind of like lab-grown meat. What the heck? I'm not doing that. So there's probably a huge opportunity for education there. And then the one below that's really interesting. 36% of people are sophisticated enough to say, oh, that might not be good for the farmers that grow the animals. And these aren't farmers we're serving. These are people like in the city are saying that might not be good for animal agriculture in a way. I thought that was pretty interesting. And then 50% of the people who would say, I have no reservations. The previous was, would you eat it? This is what this one is. Do you have concerns with it? So of the people who say, I don't have concerns, they don't have concerns with any of the other stuff either. They're the same people. So although that slide where it says free range and such going down, the people who aren't concerned about this, they're not concerned about any of that either. So there is a committed group that's like, it's in the grocery store, it's cheap, I'm buying it. Thank you. Plant-based protein. So we had to ask about plant-based protein as well. Well, my only regret about the White Castle sliders, does everybody know this, that White Castle is piloting Impossible Burger sliders? So unfortunately, near Milwaukee, I'm not really willing to drive down to Chicago to one of the pilot stores to get a slider, although if I'm in Chicago, I'll go there. Who's had the Impossible Burger? Has anybody? In the back? A couple others. What did you think of it? Anybody want to shout out? It would have been better if it had gone. John, thank you. I met John at the coffee, and I said, please, you've got to participate. Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Impossible Burger, want to make a comment about it?
It was average.
It was average. Okay, that's good. Anybody else want to comment about it? Feel a strong opinion? Texture's right. Okay. Okay. No. Anybody else want to comment on it? Well, I went... my kids are in Austin, Texas, so I get down there, and it's kind of a little bit of an outpost for us. There's a great small group of high-end burger place in Austin, Texas called Hop Dottie, and they have drop-dead delicious burgers and truffle fries. So good. And when they announced that they had the Impossible Burger, I dragged my whole family and had them have Impossible Burgers for my birthday. It's a deal in our family. You get to choose, and everybody's got to go where you want to go to eat. Because I figured if anybody could cook, I wanted to have a true Impossible Burger experience, and I figured if anybody could cook an Impossible Burger well, Hop Dottie would know how. And mine was not dry. I mean, it was medium rare. I would say about it, the texture is pretty good, although it had this crustiness on the outside that was a little weird. It wasn't a beef burger. It tasted good. Maybe I'll have one this weekend again. It was interesting, but it wasn't a beef burger. But it wasn't bad. And I could see where people would eat it. So 20% of respondents, 18 to 24, say, yeah, absolutely yes, eat it. Combine that with almost 40%. So half the people are saying, yeah, absolutely, no problem with it. If it tasted like meat, good texture, I would eat it. Interesting, up on top there, 18 to 24, 20%, 55 to 64, 3%. So it's you can see what's happening with the skew of our generations there. And then about half people say, nah, I'm not interested in it. Well, at this point, I thought we would bring in another study we had worked on a plant-based product that for a client, not Impossible Burger, but this isn't the label survey, but I thought I would share it with you because it's relevant. This one was 200 18 to 24-year-olds, and it was specifically about plant-based. And in order to be included, they had to have attended college, university, or post-high school educational experience in the previous 2 years, and we asked them about plant-based protein because part of the entry to this was getting them when they're young. And if you don't know, that the food on campus is one of the top 5 decision factors now with people choosing schools. True. There is a pretty well-known list of top 10 university chefs. You know, I can tell you that was not the case when I went to school. But, so that's a pretty good entry point. So scale, if they rated a 6 out of 10 that they would try it. You know, if it looked like that, I'd probably eat it as well. I mean, that looks pretty good to me. So they're definitely interested, that age group going to school is interested in plant-based. As independent, no offense to you guys, as independent as that age group thinks they are, they think it's the role of the educational institution to bring these offerings to them and to educate about them and to have them in a form that they're accustomed to eating food, which I thought was just kind of curious about. They thought that the university should have that much impact on them. And then what do they want? Sandwiches and wraps, and that looks like a falafel to me. I'd probably eat that too. By the way, I'm a big believer in, Chipotle has sofritas, that shredded soybean thing. If you work in this industry, I'm absolutely going to go try that. Or the Impossible Burger, I'm going to try that. I think it just helps with my understanding of the category, and I want to know what's out there. So I try all this stuff if I can manage to do it. So that young audience is definitely influenceable about you on the plant-based. Well, when we look at this next clip, this is what we're trying to avoid. You can play that, Greg, please.
This week on Marketplace,
consumers are screwed when they're faced with all of these labels.
Our second annual Top 10 countdown of lousy labels.
That stinks.
We reveal the spin on health claims. Food that claims to make us stronger, smarter, healthier.
That was from Canada. Not that far away. Some of you are with products that are in Canada. And that's ultimately what we don't want to have happen. And if you were to watch that whole episode from last year, there are brand name products that you would know. They're also in the U.S. that just get lambasted. So that's clearly what we're all trying to avoid on food labels. Not because we don't want negative publicity, but because we want to have an honest relationship, or that's my belief, that's how we operate at Charleston, Orwig. We want to have an honest relationship with our consumers. Tyne, you showed a similar slide to this. I hadn't showed anything or talked about this. That's part of what's confusing as well. So many claims out there. So what are we to take away from this? And we'll have just a little bit of time for some questions, or if you just want to share something offline, grab me and I can share this information with you or talk with you a little bit about it. But the changing relationship with food is having an impact on information and needs from the consumers. Clearly, it's evolving. The fact that we're even having such a vigorous discussion on plant-based, lab-grown, sustainability, animal agriculture, clearly our relationship with food is changing. I like to tell people when I started in agriculture, there was agriculture over here. I was going to say there was food over here, but no, there was actually food kind of was over here, and then there was some kind of chasm in the middle there. And I don't know what happened in the middle, but somehow there was agriculture, and then people ate stuff, and they weren't very connected. Now, they are very connected. So will never change. Nutrition, important. More than 71% said they want it, but what does that mean to the modern consumer? Help me sleep, don't let me get fat, build muscle faster. Science remains impactful but consuming. As we have more and more information, it's impactful but consuming. I mean, think about coffee's good for you, coffee's bad for you. No, coffee's good for you. Butter will kill you. No, you should have more butter. You shouldn't eat margarine. I mean, what's a consumer to do? We all know that's true without any research. It's like, scientists, please help us because I don't know what to do, and I have a vested interest in this kind of stuff. And so clarity and simplicity can be at odds with the breadth of information also required on the food label to get this across, because various consumers have different needs. So what's our point of view? Our point of view is more focus on the consumer, less on government, agency, NGO, various activist groups, and more about trying to serve the needs of the consumer. More probing on, we know that you're interested in labels. We know that you're interested in nutrition. Let's try to isolate how we can give you that information in a way that's useful for you. With that, I want to close with a little clip that goes back to the 50s that says we've been at this for a long time.
It takes 5 fingers.
So before we have any questions, I'd just like to wish all of you a good diet, because I sincerely hope that you can have more friends, more fun, and ultimately more pep in your lives. Thanks. Anybody have any questions about this? Or
we have 2 mics running around, so if you have some questions, please raise your hand. We have about 15 minutes. There's a question here in the front. You know, that last video really hit home because I have 2 toddlers, and right now dinner is not fun.
Yeah.
You know, it's like forcing them to eat. So I'll have to tell them they'll have more friends.
They'll have more friends and they'll have more
you
pep,
would have
ultimately.
more friends.
Yeah. So, and in addition to any questions, you know, feel free to have some discussion among yourselves, because there are companies in here who are representative in all these segments. There were companies that were or organizations that were at odds yesterday in the media. So no fighting, but, you know, discussion would be cool.
Well, here's a good question to get that started. Good morning. Would you speak to the issue of fear with regard to labeling? And how does that fit into the whole overall effort of an honest relationship with a consumer?
Fear, do you mean fear in terms of what companies put on there, or consumers are seeing on there?
As a driver behind the label, as a motivator for the type of information that you put on the product.
Yeah. Well, I think I know where you're getting, and if not, you know, correct me. Maybe you're getting to the idea of pressure from outside influences influencing, you know, causing companies to put things on that label. Or absence labeling, or, yeah, I mean, me personally, the absence labeling bothers me. It's like, here's orange juice, no asphalt included. You know, it's like, well, nobody puts asphalt in orange juice to start with. You know, kind of a ridiculous example, but, you know, we'll stay away from the actual examples. I think that's part of it, and a lot of it certainly in our society, a bunch of this, I believe, is driven by fear, and misfortune to work on food recalls sometimes, or some of these contentious issues, you know, that arise. People, if I ask my neighbors, my family, maybe my kids, I'll ask them tomorrow, they don't think food right now in America is, not only is it abundant and healthful, it's safer than it's ever been. But now we have this thing with romaine lettuce going on, unfortunately. But the difficulty right now is there can be some tiny little food safety problem in Maine, and that becomes an issue immediately across the country, or even broader than that. So I think fear in terms of motivating the consumer is having an impact, and that's where groups like this need to have a strong and clear voice, a united voice for accuracy and the truth. Because do you guys know who Kimball Musk is? Kimball Musk is Elon's quiet brother. He's also Elon of Tesla. He's also a billionaire because he's been an investor in everything, but he's just not the face of it. He's investing hundreds of millions of dollars in reinventing the food system in America. And I'm sure, I haven't met him, I'm sure he has heartfelt beliefs, but he also has a megaphone. And yes, those various people and organizations are causing consumers to probably shift their attitudes. I believe that's true.
You said science is confusing, but for agriculture, Mark, I mean, we're founded on science, right? I mean,
yes.
That's the science is really what's truth and what we can go to all the time. So if science is confusing, then how can we in agriculture combat some of those fear-driven labels that's really to strike and create fear among consumers and then want to buy that product because it doesn't have that ingredient or it's not produced that way? How do we combat that with science, or can we? Does science really not matter to consumers anymore?
Well, unfortunately, you know, the little factoids versus the facts can be taken out of context. And, well, I think that part of it is science does matter, but we can't have the attitude, and when I say we, I'm part of agriculture, we can't have the attitude that you see so often of, well, you know, the problem is, Tyne, you're just ignorant. We don't say it, but that's like the subtext. And so if you just took the time to let me give you a lesson, then you'd believe in what I believe. We have to, you know, find ways to communicate people. And I don't know who said this to me one time, but it was the first way to connect with someone who has a different point of view than you is to go to them, to acknowledge that some of these fears, some of these concerns, we may not agree with them. They may not even be founded, but we have to shed our belief in trying to combat that, and go to that person and delve into understanding the basis of it, and from that basis, then maybe we can start a dialogue, and we can get to that science point of view. And the Maeve and I, when we were looking at the research on lab-grown meat, a lot of those things clearly are nobody knows anything. So if I were in lab-grown meat, I would be spending uber resources, no pun intended, I guess, on trying to delve into people's concerns about that while there was still time to do that, because other groups will fill that void of not knowing, maybe with a position that that industry isn't happy with. And I think we've seen that happen in other categories, arguably GMO, for example. Not arguably, I mean, Rob Fraley from Monsanto. I've seen him at South by Southwest say that. We screwed up. We should have gone to the consumer's mindset rather than just, hey, we're science. Science is accurate, but consumers end up ruling. Over there, sir.
So in talking about science, what scientists do consumers trust? I mean, we use a lot of extension and university scientists, but is it sort of the media scientists like Bill Nye? Or is it industry scientists, or the people that can really spin a nice word or two, and the folks that are opposed to animal agriculture?
Well, the spin scientists certainly have a way. Bill Nye, the science guy, pretty interesting. He has made a very public shift in his point of view on some things. So I would say that they trust the science and the scientists who become attainable to them. And so just assuming that, I understand, I think technology pretty well. I like science, but I'm not a scientist. It's not a criticism of science, but the nature of a lot of technical people is to have such a deep belief in those facts that they think that other people, if they could only see the facts, would understand them and be won over. So I might criticize, some of the pop science, gloss over the facts. And I'm not saying gloss over the facts, but the technical information is not enough. We have to take that and make it into attainable information, palatable information for the consumers. So to take that, but to never assume that just because it's technically accurate, that's enough, because it's not enough. We have to get that into the minds of my neighbors. And sorry to keep saying that, but I really often think about how my neighbors would perceive things. I was at dinner with some friends. Okay, a doctor, an intensive care nurse, 2 teachers with master's degrees, my wife and I, and we're talking about somehow food, and I don't know about you guys, but they're just conversations where I'm out in public and I'm like, okay, it's Friday night in Wisconsin, it's a fish fry, we're sitting on the deck of this restaurant, I'm not going there. And these educated, their view of organic agriculture, and I'm not making an opinion here, it's just an observation. I'm talking to them, and they're just kind of like, Johnny Appleseed. Like, you just go out there and toss some seeds around, and, then Mother Nature, God bless her, comes in, and with the rain, and you just go out there and gather, kind of take the summer off, and then you just kind of gather it up in beautifully woven baskets in the fall. And then we just eat it all winter. Man, it's great. And, these are educated people. So people don't know. People don't know, and we have to not assume that the science will just tell them, because it won't. Because they are so far away from knowing, not because they're stupid, because they spend their whole life thinking about other things.
We have time for one. We only have about 5 minutes, Mark, so time for one more question
Okay.
in the...
I'll answer shorter, sorry.
No, that's okay. I guess this question, then you'll just have to answer his one-on-one afterwards. Or if we can get it real short, we can get 2 in. So
Okay.
It's on you, Mark.
Okay.
It's on you. Okay.
Okay, quick question. How do we as an industry counter all the misinformation when we have, in the state of Washington, fresh potatoes being advertised as gluten-free?
Well, they are.
But the point is that, so what?
Yeah.
That assumes that some have gluten.
Right.
Shed the differences where we can. Try to get together on some core important points that we can agree on, and make sure that we are relentless about getting those key 3, 4, 5 things across, and not dissuaded from the mission versus, spike over here, which just becomes noise and not confusing and never breaks through the clutter. Realize that the basics are not done. Need to work on the basics hard, united for a very long time.
I was at an event with gluten-free bacon, and so I made a smart aleck comment, and I said, "Oh, I had no idea bacon even had gluten," And the girl behind was like, "Oh, you didn't?"
Could have been breaded. Yes, sir.
So in this era of so-called fake news, how much more important, how will the trend change over the next few years as far as believability and importance of labeling? What do you think the consumers are going to believe?
Well, if you've seen some of the artificial intelligence things where I've spoken enough here, so there's a program that you can get from Google right now that could make my voice say literally anything. That could translate my voice into what you just said perfectly. So that's some scary stuff. But what's not fake is the label that's on that package. 63% of the people say that's extremely important to them, and 72% say they want to know the nutrition information on there. So I would say make sure that be a freak. If you have a product ultimately that gets out in a package of some sort, or even you're supplying a product that gets to that package, I would be a freak for making sure that in this captive audience of that label with somebody who says they want to read that I was doing a brilliant job of getting that done. Because then all this other stuff would be happening, but ultimately I'm in the store, I pick this up, I'm sitting at breakfast and I'm reading it, it's there in front of me. So there's your opportunity, almost one-on-one, not person to person, but package to person. That's a one-on-one relationship that you can control.
But with a quote-unquote fake news, I mean, if it does anything, it's making people second guess and say,
Yeah.
okay, what I'm reading, maybe it's not true. Maybe I need to find another source for this. So do you think that is an opportunity where consumers then start to second guess that label? Oh, it says raised without antibiotics. Oh, it says that, do they start to second guess some of the labels in the future now that the conversation's starting to happen and you can't take something for face value?
Yes, they do. And I just did this webinar on crisis communications last week, and the very end of that says that what you need is that's going to occur. Well, we need to build reputational capital. Reputational capital is making sure that our story accurately is out there, I cannot keep certain groups from putting information out. What I can do is make sure that I do a brilliant job of putting my information out there, so at least I get the benefit of the doubt. You know, I think of it as reputational capital is your armor. It's your intellectual in the mind of the other person, armor against the negative. And so if you can have that focused, clear, not too diverse messaging around the core points, and I can get somebody to my package, and then I can have that one-on-one package to person relationship, I have an opportunity to communicate. It's going to get, I don't want to leave everybody with a negative. It's going to get harder and harder, but there's opportunity there because you can still get through. My final thing would be bring it in, focus. Realize you can't talk about everything. Decide what's important. Talk about that. And then when you think you're done talking about that, you've barely begun to penetrate my neighbors. Talk about it again. And then when you think you've done that, they're almost barely aware of what you're talking about. Talk about it again and again and again. Focus and consistent with what is really important to you. Research can tell you that. And don't be dissuaded or pulled off into side conversations.
Mark Gale of Charleston, Orwig. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, well, it's time for a quick break. But don't forget, you can support the College Aggies online program by making a purchase at the silent auction. There are several steak packages, turkey fryer, case of bacon up for grabs, tons of stuff, so go out and check that out. We have a break from 9:30 to 10 o'clock. It's right outside, 9:30, right outside, kind of where we had breakfast. Be sure to be right back here at 10 a.m., and thank you to Kyle.
minute. Yep, she said she was good. She has coffee. All right, we're getting ready to get started. If everyone wants to take a seat. One thing we do want to mention while everyone is finding their seat, this year there is a cell phone charging station in the back doors of the room, and it's sponsored by K Global, North Carolina Farm Bureau, and American Farm Bureau Federation. So if you're tweeting a lot or doing all of that, your battery's quickly going to drain, like mine has already. Be sure to charge your phones right outside. And don't forget, the hashtag this year is hashtag AAA18. So be sure to use that on some of your tweets, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot from this next panel. All right, to get us started, this next one is talking about postmodern animal ag begins now. We have kind of a panel discussion. To moderate that, we have Chuck Jolley. Chuck Jolley is president of Jolley & Associates, a marketing and public relations firm that really concentrates on the food industry. He's also president of the Meat Industry Hall of Fame, honoring the legendary figures of the business. He actually graduated from Michigan State University, go green, with a degree in broadcast journalism and was publisher of the leading business-to-business magazine serving the meat and poultry industry. He's a frequent contributor of articles about agriculture and meat and poultry industry to business magazines and web-based publications. So with that, let's welcome Chuck to the stage.
First, I want to thank the people who came before us, the two speakers, Tyne and Mark. Great presentations. I've been to a lot of these things, and those were two of the best I think I've ever seen. So a little applause for those folks. What we want to do here this morning is talk about where animal agriculture in general really, is going in the next 10 or 20 years. I think a lot of people think that agriculture is kind of a stuck in the mud behind the times kind of a deal, which can't be further from the truth. It's probably one of the most advanced businesses in the U.S. at least. But that said, all of the inputs are changing. All of the demands that people are expecting are changing, and we need to know more about what those changes are, where those changes are going to lead us. So I've asked three people to join the panel here, three super achievers who really know what they're doing, really know what they're talking about, to kind of give their overview. We'll spend the first 30 minutes or so listening to what they have to say, and then we'll open up for questions afterwards. So if you have questions that pop into your mind while they're talking, go ahead and write them down so you'll remember when it's time to do the Q&A. We're going to start with Danielle Nierenberg. Danielle is a world-renowned researcher, speaker, and advocate on all issues relating to our food system and agriculture. In 2013, she co-founded Food Tank, a nonprofit organization focused on building a global community for safe, healthy, nourished eaters. Food Tank is a global convener, research organization, and non-biased creator of original research impacting the food system. An amazing organization that, like I said, is just 5 years old, and it's become, I think, an international influence, a really world influencer on food, how we grow it, how we eat it. And with that, let me bring Danielle to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure for me to be here. I want to thank Chuck and the Animal Agricultural Alliance for including my perspective here today. It's not often that I get to meet with a group of such distinguished experts who are doing such interesting things in animal agriculture. So again, I'm Dani Nierenberg. I work for this organization called Food Tank. Our mission is to really highlight stories of hope and success in the food system. You know, what's working in fields and boardrooms and classrooms, kitchens and processing plants and other entities all over the world. I've had this incredible opportunity to travel to 70-plus countries, interviewing hundreds and hundreds of farmers and ranchers, scientists, extension workers, policymakers, women's groups, youth advocacy groups, really the whole range of stakeholders in the food system, and again, collect their thoughts about what's working on the ground. A lot of my interest is focused on small and medium-sized farmers and family farmers, but what Food Tank tries to do is really include all voices. Chuck mentioned that we're an important aspect of our work is convening. And so every year we have Food Tank summits in different cities. A few months ago we were in Washington, D.C. With a conference focused on cultivating the next generation of agricultural leaders and young people in the food system. We'll be in New York City this fall discussing the issue of food loss and food waste, and then in San Diego to talk about immigrant and veteran farmers in November. So, you know, as a research and advocacy organization, we really try to bring together the whole sort of every side and every face of the food system. We've had Monsanto executives on the same stage as food justice advocates. We've had the CEO of Cargill talking on the same stage as, you know, vegan activists. We really try to bring together as many voices as possible and put people together who normally wouldn't get the chance to talk to one another, which is why I'm really glad to be here today. Chuck asked me to sort of talk about what I'm seeing, you know, what has happened over the last 10, 20 years in animal agriculture, and then talk about, you know, sort of the trends for the future. And so I think, you know, I started my career about 16 years ago, really looking at the growth of industrial animal agriculture in developing countries, and traveled particularly to Asia to look at how animal agriculture was growing and what were the positive and negative aspects of that for communities, looking at, you know, processing plants and slaughterhouses as well as farms themselves. And so that's a trend that I think is continuing, right? Industrial animal agriculture is growing all over the world, even in places like sub-Saharan Africa. There are obviously risks involved in that for public health, for communities, for worker safety, for animal welfare. It's a trend that's continuing and needs to be looked at in again, a non-biased way so that workers and the environment and animal welfare, again, can all be protected while also making money for farmers. So I think that's, you know, something that Food Tank will certainly follow it, but there are a lot of different advocacy and research and science organizations who are looking at it as well. I think, you know, the speaker before from Charleston, Orwig, you know, pointed out, like, I don't think 5 or 10 or even 15 years ago we were looking at, we could anticipate this growth in plant-based alternative meats. I think it's such an interesting time for the meat industry to be on the forefront of that, with companies like Tyne and others investing in plant-based alternatives. I think there's a real opportunity there to be on the, you know, the cusp of a growing trend, and to have the opportunity to include that in your business portfolios. I don't think, 20 years ago we would be seeing this concern about zoonotic and foodborne diseases. And I think that there's a real opportunity, again, for the meat industry to be at the forefront of preventing those occurrences from happening in the first place, and then also, educating consumers in different ways about how to protect themselves, why these things happen, and how they can be prevented. I think there's a really growing concern in the meat and livestock industry about aging farmers. According to the last agricultural census, the average age of farmers in the United States is 58.3 years old. So there's a real opportunity for farmers and ranchers to begin mentoring that next generation of agricultural leaders and involve them in ways that they can become leaders themselves and learn better business skills, get the mentoring they need to do their jobs well. I think the next Farm Bill has a real opportunity to make sure that young farmers are included. They face a lot of challenges, as you all know. They lack access to land. They lack access to, again, business and mentoring skills. They lack access to credit and health insurance, and they're struggling to pay off student loans. So I think the more that the industry can be on the side of those young and new farmers and really help them get those skills they need, the more the industry can grow. I think that there's also this interesting demand from consumers for transparency in the food system and the story behind their food. Again, 20 years ago when sort of farmers markets in the United States were becoming more popular, I don't think we would have seen this growing interest in getting to know your farmer, getting to know how your food was grown, asking questions. I think, especially with millennial consumers, they, might not be cooking as much as their predecessors, but they do want that story behind their food and want to know more about it. And I think there's a real opportunity for the meat industry to like really take that on and to make sure that they're creating awareness among their consumers about how their products were raised and processed and the story behind them. I think, as the concerns about climate change grow as well, the meat industry has an opportunity to talk about the different methods of livestock production that can either contribute to, mitigate, or even in some cases reverse the impacts of climate change. Again, it's an opportunity to tell a story about what's happening. And I think many farmers and ranchers and meat industry executives haven't always been the best at telling those stories. But again, there's a real opportunity to change the conversation and share those ideas and insights. I'm really excited about a couple of things that I think are on the horizon. One is this idea of big data and artificial intelligence. You see how that can help both small and large farmers alike with being able to access more information about markets or predict weather patterns or figure out, when the next sort of, foodborne illness or zoonotic disease outbreak will occur. There's a real opportunity for the meat industry to be on the forefront of that and for farmers themselves to be using big data in really creative and interesting ways. And then I think the idea of true cost accounting in the food system is becoming more important. I'm working with the United Nations Environment Program on a project called the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity. It's a terrible, their acronym is really terrible. It's called TEEB Agri-Food, but it's really an assessment of both the positive and negative externalities of how we produce and consume food. And it's being looked at as sort of the IPCC for food. They'll be releasing their report June 5th, which is World Environment Day. And I'll make sure that Chuck has it and any of you who are interested has a link to the report, because it does really assess both big, medium, and small-scale livestock systems, and I think in interesting ways. And I think there will be a lot of surprises from it, including that, I think there's a tendency from people and sort of my side of the debate to think that big is always bad. That's not necessarily the case. I think there are ways that big and small livestock producers alike can use technology in creative ways that they aren't doing right now. I'd like to end on something that's been really important to me as I've started Food Tank and thought more about these issues. I really want more of a discussion on combining both high and low technologies, learning from traditional methods and also combining them with the latest innovations in technology. That's not something that's discussed enough. I think there's a tendency to look at these issues as very black and white rather than gray. So I'm hoping that you all, and as you continue your discussions over the next